Welcome back to the Biafra story, Forsyth'S account of a forgotten war. Today, we examine the months that led to the birth of a nation. In our previous episode, we saw the deep fractures inside Nigeria and the events of 1966, the coups and the mass violence that shattered the federation. Today, we follow the political road that ran from the aftermath of that violence to the formal declaration of the Republic of Biafra on May 30th, 1967. Forsyth treats this period as the moment when the last realistic chance of remaining inside the Nigerian Federation was lost to a series of tragic failures. After the mass killings of September and October 1966, the eastern region was a land defined by deep trauma and a profound growing distrust of Lagos. Hundreds of thousands of people, some estimates say over 1 million, had been driven back to their ancestral homes in the east, carrying only what they could hold. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu, the military governor, faced a population that no longer believed the federal government could, or even would, protect their lives. Stories of slaughter spread quickly as families reunited. These eyewitness accounts hardened attitudes and made the idea of reconciliation seem like a distant dream. The East was struggling. Its infrastructure was buckling under the weight of the displaced, and the regional government had to act alone to provide for them. Against this backdrop, an attempt was made in early 1967 to pull the country back from the edge. The military leaders agreed to meet on neutral ground. The meeting took place in Aburi, Ghana. It was hosted by General Joseph Ankara, and for a brief moment, it seemed that peace was finally within reach. The talks produced the Aburi Accord. Forsyth presents this as a genuine effort to create a looser, confederal arrangement that recognized regional realities. In a confederation, the regions would hold the balance of power. This was exactly what the East felt it needed to ensure the safety of its citizens. Ojukwu left Aburi believing he had secured a deal that allowed the East to feel secure, while still technically remaining part of the Nigerian framework. When the leaders returned home, the atmosphere in the East was one of cautious hope. But in Lagos, a different narrative was already beginning to take shape. The agreement began to unravel almost immediately. What was seen as a breakthrough in Aburi became a source of intense friction back in Nigeria. Forsyth argues that the federal side, led by Yakubu Gowon, soon began to reinterpret or water down the specific commitments made in Ghana. Federal civil servants in Lagos were deeply worried. They believed the Aburi Accord would lead to the total disintegration of Nigeria as a nation. The dispute became technical. Lagos issued Decree 8, claiming it implemented Aburi. But to the east, the decree actually stripped them of the autonomy promised. A key point was the control of the military. Aburi promised that regional governors would have a say in military actions in their regions. Decree 8 removed it. For Ojukwu and the eastern leadership, this wasn't just a legal disagreement. It confirmed their worst fears, that Lagos could not be trusted to keep its word. Accusations of bad faith flew in both directions. Communication between Enugu and Lagos became strained and eventually broke down completely. We must remember, the memory of the 1966 killings was still raw. To the people of the East, regional autonomy was the only shield against a repeat of the horror. Economic warfare began to take root. Lagos withheld federal funds, and Enugu responded by seizing federal revenues collected within the region. In March 1967, the East passed the Revenue Collection Edict. This was a clear sign that the region was moving toward practical independence. The East began managing its own security, its own railways, and its own post offices. It was effectively becoming a state within a state. Forsyth describes the mood as one of reluctant determination. He portrays Ojukwu as a leader being pushed forward by the overwhelming will of his people. In Forsyth's view, Ojukwu was not chasing personal glory. He was responding to a population that saw no other way to ensure their future survival. By May 1967, the tension had reached a breaking point. Every attempt at a middle ground had failed. The road now led in only one direction. In a final move to isolate the East, Gowon announced the creation of 12 new states, effectively splitting the eastern region's heartland from the oil-producing coast. The Eastern Consultative Assembly met. They gave Ojukwu the mandate to declare the region an independent and sovereign republic at the earliest possible date. On May 30th, 1967, that mandate was fulfilled. Forsyth presents this moment as the tragic but logical conclusion of a chain of failures. To him, the Federation had already died in the streets in 1966. The failure to prevent massacres, the failure to deliver justice, and the failure to implement the spirit of Aburi all led to this single fateful declaration. In the book, secession is never portrayed as the first choice. It is presented as the last available option for a people who felt they were being pushed into a corner. Forsyth is particularly critical of external powers, especially Britain, whom he felt favoured the federal side despite the humanitarian crisis unfolding in the East. We must reflect on the source. Forsyth was writing the Biafra story from a position of deep sympathy while living among those who feared for their lives. His narrative reflects that atmosphere, one of extreme urgency, raw grievance, and the absolute conviction that Biafra was the only path to safety. However, distance has allowed for wider perspectives. While the trauma of the refugees is undeniable, later historians have analysed the federal side more fully. The federal government in Lagos feared that if the East left, the entire country would fragment along dozens of ethnic lines, leading to endless chaos. Then there were the resources. The strategic importance of the oil-producing areas cannot be overstated. For Lagos, losing the East meant losing the nation's economic heart. Authors like John de Sanjor offer a more balanced picture, describing a series of mutual miscalculations where both sides felt they had no choice but to escalate. Academic studies have also looked at the broader context of the Cold War and the difficulties of holding a multi-ethnic state together after the shocks of 1966. So, the road to secession was paved with the bloodshed of 1966, the broken hopes of Aburi, and the deepening financial and administrative rift. In our next episode, we will look closely at the two men at the center of this storm, Ojukwu and Gowon, and how their characters shaped the war to come. Thank you for watching. This has been episode 2 of the Biafra story, Forsyth's account of a forgotten war. Stay with us as the story continues.